Cool. I think we can start. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining for the webinar today. This webinar is going to be about the Kubernetes 1.36 release, which was released last week. And we have today with us Ryota, who was the release lead for this release. And Ryota, if you could just introduce yourself, where you work, and what you were doing in the Kubernetes community, I think that would be great.
Sure. So hi, I'm Ryota. I was the release lead for 136 release, which, as we discussed, went out last week, almost exactly last week, a few hours after this, but yeah, last week. And I have been involved with the Kubernetes release team from 132, so it's been a couple of years. And as at work, I have been using Kubernetes quite a bit, and it's been a journey of Kubernetes management, developing applications on top of Kubernetes, and also recently doing some operator developments around Kubernetes and databases. So that's the main bits that I've been working on. I'm a contract freelance engineer for a company called Numtide. So yeah, happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Yep, and a bit of intro from me. I'm Arsh. I work as a senior DevRel engineer at Metal Bear. I used to be a part of the Kubernetes community and used to contribute actively. I was part of the Kubernetes release team as well for releases, I think 1.23 till 1.25. But this webinar is not going to be about those releases. We are going to be talking about the release which happened just last week. And just so that we have some more context on how familiar you all are with the release and what all went on in it. If you could just let us know in comments if you have already, upgraded or are thinking of upgrading, or at least familiar with, some of the highlights were in this release, that would be great. But Ryota, I think it would be nice to begin with talking about what was your personal highlight for this release, like in terms of something which the community wanted for a long time, a feature or a request which you saw and which something people were really excited for and which finally got shipped in this release.
Yeah, there are quite a few. So I would start with the numbers, and the 136 is the first one in 2026, and depending on the timing of the release, we usually have 3 releases a year. The one in this time, the springtime, is usually the busier one, given that the one right before, is through the winter time, where lots of holidays and breaks tend to make it difficult for people to actually ship everything out in time. So we do have 70 Kubernetes enhancement proposals in this release. And as far as I'm aware, this is the highest number of Kubernetes enhancement proposal kept in a single release. So there's a lot that we can go into. I'm not going to cover everything. And a few things that I can definitely talk about is one that's already also mentioned in the Metal Bear blog is the user namespace finally being in a stable GA release. So that's one big milestone. I think the other bits that people have been talking about, and I am personally intrigued by, was the workload-aware scheduling, which is also shortened to WAS. That kind of goes in with DRA, which stands for Dynamic Resource Allocation. So DRA and WAS, those are both related to, not restricted to, AI workloads and some GPU intensive and very different scheduling models from the old model of just having pods and stateful set and deployments. So that is a very big feature, although the WAS feature is for the alpha release, so it's not enabled for everyone at the moment, but it is such a huge milestone for the community that everyone can build on top of it rather than using some third-party tools. So I think that's a really big one that I would say that is worth highlighting. There are a few more that we highlighted as a release team in the release blog, and also there are a few that I'm sure Metal Bear has been talking about on the blog. So yeah, there are so many that I can go into, but I think I would just go with quick two picks for the moment, which is user namespace. Personally, I think that's a big win, and also the WAS workload aware scheduling. That's another one.
Yeah, and when I was going through, the features that have been shipped, I saw that a lot of those were about DRA, and that has been a trend. Maybe I think in the last release also I noticed that. So I wanted to ask you if that is like intentional, like because a lot of DRA features are being used by teams who are running AI workloads on Kubernetes. Has there been an intentional shift towards prioritizing KEPs which are about DRA, or if you could just let us know what is the process of how KEPs get prioritized, and is it just a coincidence that we see a lot of features related to DRA being shipped, or has that been an intentional action on the part of the release team based on what the community is asking for?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and that's a very multifaceted question in a way. So one quick short answer would be that yes, this is something that the community wanted, and also all the contributors wanted to highlight, and thus the release team is here to put that out as a kind of one of the top picks. The other bit, a little bit longer explanation to it, is that the DRA, WAS, and all the AI workloads, training and inference, that those GPU intensive or workload intensive workloads that are very intensive on some resource that probably needs DRA or probably needs workload aware scheduling, those are not the one team doing all the work around making it available for Kubernetes. It was, I think if I remember correctly, there is a working group called WG Device Management. I might be wrong with the actual name, but the DRA and the device management side of things was a part of the working group. But at the same time, it just goes into SIG network, SIG scheduling, SIG node. There are so many SIGs, special interest group, a part of the Kubernetes ecosystem that kind of like has the vertical of SIG node being responsible for node and compute and making sure that compute is available for everyone. So that multiple SIGs being involved and multiple working groups have to work together to make this DRA possible, makes it so that it is such a collaborative work, not just as an open source project, but also as separate SIGs, which mean that we get some reference from each SIG saying that, okay, this is something that we want to highlight. We think that is important for the community and thus should be a part of the release blog. And we get lots of it. And we get lots of different items saying that, okay, this is one for auto scheduling, this is auto scaling, and this is for scheduling, this is for apps. And many would be mentioning about significant work being done on DRA. And that has been the case, as far as I remember, it's from 1.33, where we had loads of DRA-related changes, and we had a big section of DRA-specific one in the blog. So you have multiple KEPs mentioned in around the DRA, and then there's just one heading in the blog. That just comes down with the fact that there has been a lot of focus from the contribution community groups and the tech leads and chairs saying that this is significant work that we want to push it forward and make sure that everyone is aware. And at the same time, it is something that the community wanted. So I think it just goes two ways, where it started with lots of contribution, a lot of work being done behind the scenes, and thus we wanted to highlight. But at the same time, that is just a sign that it is something significant for the wider community that they should be really aware of, and it is probably an interest for many. So yeah, that's probably the longer answer of why DRA is being so much of a attention, like getting attention, and it is probably fair that they should get that sort of interest and attention and kind of highlight in each release since 1.33, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So what I understood was that not only are different SIGs just prioritizing this because the community wants it, but that also leads you and the broader release team to emphasize more on these features because people want to learn about it and the community is asking about it. So other than DRA, what do you like when you were prioritizing different features? How does that process look like? Is it just something which the SIGs have a say over, or as a release lead and as the release team, do you have some sort of process of deciding what gets prioritized in this particular release?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So we do get a lot of input from each SIG, and we ask for some highlights and some things that we want to cover in the blog. And in most cases, we get a list of caps and a list of items that have changed in this release. For instance, if it's a deprecation, that's one of the things that we want to highlight and make sure that everyone knows about. And in a way that it would break people and it would break people's environment. So we want to highlight that first. But in some cases, there are some significant change around the GA or beta. Those are the ones that have probably wider implications and wider impact to the users. So we tend to have that as a highlight, big, like larger highlight for that particular release, whatever that may be. For this one, it was 136. But at the same time, we do not want to just say that, okay, beta is this and GA is this, so that you should have a look at these 2 or 3 highlights. But we do want to kind of gear the kind of the interest around, oh, this is an exciting change to Kubernetes that could not be done before. Alpha is all about something new and something that has never been the case that we can actually do with Kubernetes. So we do try to get the balance of what are the things that we want to talk about, what are the most relevant things based on the highlights and based on the input that we got from each SIG, and then we kind of curate in a way that would be meaningful for most people, if not all. So there is obviously some kind of gap and some probable bias towards how the communication is done. But in a way, we do try to do that rather than just listening everything. So that's something that we try to do. We can't just accommodate everyone's interest, but at the same time, I think there are a few that everyone would say that, okay, this is something that's interesting and that should be talked about. It's pretty much, it is definitely a consensus and, easy enough consensus to get to with within the release team. It's not my say to say release lead, okay, I want to highlight this and that goes as the top highlight of the release blog, but it's more of the teamwork, and that's usually more straightforward than other bits that could be controversial.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the way I'm seeing is that you all like come together and basically it's a collective effort where you decide what the community needs and sort of prioritize that based on inputs from different SIGs. So my next question was actually you mentioned that, and like you do not immediately become a Kubernetes release lead. You have to be a part of the release team for a lot of releases. So you have seen, I think, what release have you been a part of with like the release team since?
So 132 was the first one. So 132, 3, 4, 5, 6. So yeah, it's been a few releases, more than a few releases.
So more than a few releases and definitely more than a year. So I wanted to ask you if, like in that time, you would have seen the different features that get highlighted. In your opinion, what do you think is shifting? Like, where is Kubernetes heading towards in terms of what is becoming the feature highlight? Because Kubernetes itself does not require a lot of features. I mean, I'm sure people would disagree, but as a platform, it is quite stable. So is the community mostly trying to address this need, which is coming of running AI workloads on Kubernetes? Or is it still like minor bug fixes or just minor improvements? Or is it growing more towards the security side with workloads, needing more stuff to just prevent accidents from happening, which we sort of see more CVs rise as like AI gets part of the Kubernetes platform and ecosystem?
Yeah, it's such a difficult question to answer, which it is a good question, and I would start with the fact that from joining the 132 release, I have been looking at the numbers of each release, and number of contributors especially have been very stable and steady, and it's not increasing too much, but it's quite significant in a way that it's never had a drop on number of contributors. So Kubernetes has been always relevant in the past 5 or 6 releases to all the contributors. They have been still contributing. Maybe there are a few new ones and old ones retiring, but still Kubernetes has been relevant. And I think that relevancy is what's driving the Kubernetes ecosystem as a whole. So for instance, we talked about DRA, and I talked about briefly about the WAS. And those are the things that we didn't really need before, but making sure that Kubernetes is still relevant in this AI era, it is definitely something that the community needed to see that evolution in Kubernetes ecosystem, making sure that the Kubernetes is relevant rather than having to use some third-party tool to make it happen. So the changes and actual contributions around Kubernetes have been around how is this relevant to what users and what community use cases do we need to actually suffice and to tackle. So those definitely had more interest around DRA and WAS, and rightly so. We are highlighting quite a bit of that workload related to AI and ML. But at the same time, the security is something that we still have a lot of work that needs to be done. Not just because Kubernetes, not because Kubernetes is broken. It's more that Kubernetes has more relevant use cases to different use cases that Kubernetes couldn't do before or didn't have as the primary use cases. And we are seeing more things that we can do to secure the Kubernetes to even further production grade system. So that's something that have been driving a lot of attention and kind of contributions around Kubernetes. But there are a few other things that are around the developer efficiency, developer experience, and the things that are just nice to have, being a part of the Kubernetes. One of the things that I actually personally, I don't think it's highlighted anywhere because I think it's still early in the days and it's pretty specific. But there is one change, Kubernetes enhancement proposal around PVC and PVC, the persistent volume claim. Getting the volume available has been around in Kubernetes for a really long time. But there is one feature, pretty subtle, but one feature added is the persistent volume being used at what time at the last time. So there is this used or attached at last. I'm not exactly.
Last use time on PVC. It's one of the features we mentioned in our blog, also in the alpha features, because it stood out to me. Because I think it's like a use case which gets ignored, but like I thought it was pretty cool, and the implementation also. It's just like one small field, but it can make such a huge difference, like for people. But yeah, sorry to interrupt you. You were talking about the feature.
No, yeah, thank you for covering me that exact name, because I was just going through all of that and I was thinking, what's the actual name about it? But yeah, the fix, not the fix, the feature and the change is subtle but still really relevant and really useful. So I think that's something that it was eye-opening in a way, because everyone had been talking about during the release cycle. We obviously talked about all the changes that didn't make into 136 and are likely to go into 137 onwards. We track and monitor most of them. But at the same time, when I was looking at this CV change, I was like, okay, that's right. We didn't have this before. This is really nice to have. And this is such a nice addition that may not need the super highlight, but at the same time, it is some change that the community, I would feel, that really benefit from. So, the Kubernetes is all about relevance for me, at least from my perspective, that we are trying to solve people's problems and not just, release lead deciding what and SIGs deciding what they want to do. It's more about how can we make sure that the Kubernetes stays relevant, and also Kubernetes is the platform that of the choice for any workloads or any use cases.
Yeah, I think that you covered that. You covered what I had to ask like brilliantly. I think I've asked you a lot of questions about what's in the release. Now I want to shift to address some of the questions I think people have around demystifying what the release process for one of the biggest open source projects looks like, and how your experience was like, and if people want to become a part of that, what should that look like? But before we get into all of that, I just wanted to say that when I was writing the blog, so I read, your like take where you like why you named the release what you named it and the release logo, and it was really impressive to me. And we were having this discussion internally also that the logo is just beautiful. I just want you to maybe just share some of your inspiration behind the theme and just designing the logo and getting it to look like what it looks like. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I'll just bring it up on the screen so that you can see the logo while Ryota talks about it.
Sure. So the release name is called Haru. In Japanese pronunciation, it will be Haru. Me being a Japanese, it was some name that struck me in a way that I needed to incorporate that sound somehow, and it just ended up by being itself. So Haru, I can do a brief kind of description of what Haru is. So Haru has basically three different meanings associated with it. So Haru being the word for spring, hare being word for clear and sunny sky, and haruka means distant and far future. So those three things, I think that just covers really well. And the focus was around number 36 and happened to be it's the 36 views of Mount Fuji by Hokusai. That's a ukiyo-e artist in Japan. Like that, the famous artwork of Great Wave of Kanagawa, which is made in 1800s. I can't exactly remember the year, but it's such a historic artwork and masterpiece that many people are probably aware of. But at the same time, when it comes to the actual art and design, I have to give all the credits to my designer, Natsuho. I think I have a reference to her um, profile and all that in the release blog in the Kubernetes side. But the design process started with, we want to incorporate that this particular release is in a way spring release. So it went out on 22nd of April. And at the same time, the release process started in January. So 136 release process started in, I think, January 12th. So the very early January when it was very dark and gray, it was very cold, especially in London. And when we started this journey, we knew that the release would be around 14, 15 weeks. So usually release process usually takes about 14, 15 weeks. That's the usual case. In this particular 136 release, it was 15 weeks. And we knew that that lands in April. We wanted to have this sunny weather, just leading up to, the summer, the nice weather, and there's a lot to uncover and just something that to be excited about. So that's a part of the kind of design and release that we wanted to incorporate. I wanted to incorporate, making sure that we highlight it. But the release 136, although it is personally significant, obviously I led it, but at the same time, 136 only a milestone that would be a part of the journey of Kubernetes 137, 38, and onwards. So I think it's so important that there is so much work and significant contributions and efforts and time commitments from every team member and every community members to make this release happen. But also there is so much more to come. So I think that kind of spring nature and also far distant future still ahead. Clear skies, perhaps it is actually clear and sunny sky here in London, which just happens to be one of the rare cases, and it's nice to have. But at the same time, it doesn't continue that way, and it doesn't stop here. It just has to be a continuous effort of making sure that 137 happens correctly, 138 happens correctly. So I think the release theme about and the logo was to make sure that we are here to mark that 136 milestone, and it's been such an amazing journey. But also this leads to another one, 137, 38, and onwards, and that we should be excited about. So that's how the release kind of naming and theme came about. There is a lot more details, and
What
I thought
I'm
so much
curious,
about it.
yeah, I'm curious about the cats. Like, what made you add the cats to it? Do you have cats of your own, or like, where did those come from?
Yeah, those cats are my own cats, and they are sleeping right behind me, so I can't really. Yeah,
Yeah,
I wish I could introduce them here, but yeah, that just had a extra point to add, and they were the ones that were distracting me and intruding all the release meetings. So not today for some reason, but yeah, those are the cats that I needed to incorporate.
Yeah. By the way, thank you, Jake, for sharing the Logo Creators Twitter handle. If you folks want to check them out and just let them know what a great job they did designing this, I think that would be really cool. So yeah, that was about the theme of the release. Now I want to dig in a bit more into your experience as a release lead. So can you? I think a lot of people are not familiar with how the release team works, and I'll try to recap that for people. So the Kubernetes release team, by the way, it's totally open. Like anyone can apply to be on the release team. In fact, it is highly encouraged because Kubernetes needs volunteers and people who can grow into roles across the release team. So there are different, I think, parts of the release team, and I'm not familiar with all the names now. But you apply as a mentee on one of the sub teams, and then you grow as a lead of the particular team, and then you become a shadow of the release. Like Ryota would have had release shadows, and then eventually you lead a release of your own. So, going through all of this, like, would you say that your experience being part of the release team changed and you learned new things every time? And what were those learnings? And especially, what was your one, like, if you were to pick a few learnings which stood out throughout this entire journey of leading the release, what would those be?
Yeah, where do I start? So I started with 132, and then it's been a few releases
Yeah.
since then. And the release team is built of 5 different teams, roughly. So one team, which is a release lead team, so it sits at the top of the release team, and then just basically manages and monitors how every other sub teams are doing. And we have 4 sub teams. One is called docs, probably simple documentation and docs team. Comms for communications, that includes blogs, a webinar, and some other extra communications that we do with third-party media and press. And release signal, which is a team to monitor the health status of the release from basically day one, making sure that everything is building, compiling, any test errors will be reported as a red error that we need to take actions for, or we communicate to the SIGs and relevant teams. And the last one is enhancements. So enhancements is the one that starts the process of making sure that we have number of Kubernetes enhancement proposals correct. We track them, making sure that all the details are in place so that we can make them as a part of the release. So the whole process of the Kubernetes release starts in basically around 15 weeks, as I said. So in this 136 started in January. And the process starts from enhancements team and release signal tracking and making sure that everything is green from release signal point of view, making sure that everything's building. We are ready to get the release being cut and being made ready for everyone in 10, 15 weeks time when it starts. And also enhancements team to start tracking what are the things that we want to incorporate to 136, what are the things that we have an extreme amount of the contribution code changes around, and make sure that those are done in with the right information in the enhancements documents. And also we track with any documentation changes needed properly. That's the docs work, and the comms will be providing some communication to the community, such as blogs, sneak peek blogs, and press communication and media webinar, stuff like that. So the breakdown of the sub-team makes it so that there are 4 sub-teams, as I said, and each sub-team is something that you can apply for as a shadow. So I think the 137 shadow application form would open probably like in a week or 2, and would be basically available for anyone. And one thing that I would say is that you're not expected, or you do not have to be technical, and you do not have to be like an expert in Kubernetes, but you do have to have an interest in Kubernetes, and also you do have to write a proper application. Otherwise, the competition is really, really high that it's usually about 20 spots that everyone is competing for, but we get more than 400 applications. So you kind of see the interest and the actual competition around it. But once you're part of it, you would learn a lot about that particular sub-team. I started with the communication, so I started with blog writing and media coverage, webinar, and that gave me the perspective of how that communication it goes to the community from the Kubernetes release team. And that journey took me to further up to release lead team. And release lead team is also a lead and the shadows. So I started with the shadow in the release lead team, and I was looking after the enhancements and also communication, and then kind of grew into covering multiple and different areas. So at this point, I know roughly about what each sub-team does, when they are most busy, and when they are most critical and have to get things done in time. And that really changes depending on the sub-team that you join. And that's the reason why it's such a difficult job to make sure that everything is in line, everything is fully ready for the release day, which seems like it's 15 weeks. It's a long process, a long period that most of the things get ironed out, which we do. But at the same time, there is so much work going behind the scenes. So I think I learned so much from the fact that there's so many people in the release team as a whole. It's around 30 to 40 people. And on top of it, there are so many SIGs that we deal with. So SIG release is the release team is under. So SIG release is a bigger kind of umbrella special interest group. But then other special interest groups like SIG Node, SIG scheduling, SIG CLI, those are the SIGs that we deal with and we talk to. So we get a lot of interaction with all the SIGs. And that's something that I figured from going through the many cycles, that there is just so much happening in Kubernetes. There is so much interest and contributors' commitment in a voluntary work that people are trying to make Kubernetes better because they care about it. That's something I learned firsthand. It's just such an eye-opening experience, rather than just seeing that release is out, or that's great. Yes, we can have an extra tool and extra features that are available to us, but it just makes it more personal and makes more relevant for myself, because obviously I worked in a release team. I care about the release, but at the same time, it just makes it clear that there is so much work going behind the scenes, and I just have to appreciate all the work that every SIG put together. And yeah, it's not just a release team doing all the work, obviously. There are so many people behind the scenes, and yeah, I can only speak on behalf of them saying this is an exciting release. It's always an exciting release in a way, but there is so much work that's going behind the scenes. And yeah, I can only highlight and say that, you know, this is worth a shot, and we should definitely have a look at what 136 can bring, and even onward 137, 38 will be even more exciting, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think I think you put it brilliantly. It's the people behind the release team that you start to appreciate when you start to see how much everyone is doing for the community, and like how much effort. Like, I think being just a consumer of Kubernetes, people don't realize how big of a task just coordinating such a large project which has contributors all across the world, working across different time zones, and doing all of that is such a huge task on its own. Um, so I have a couple of questions from people who are watching the webinar. I Can you see them on the screen? But I'll read them out anyways. Vera is asking, where does the announcement appear and where can we apply? So I think they're asking about the release team for 137. Could you, let them know?
Yeah, sure. So usually the announcement for the release team application, I think it is sent to the mailing list and also Slack channel. So I personally find it easiest to find it in SIG release Slack channel in Kubernetes Slack workspace. So if you go to, I think, Kubernetes
Slack, I'll find out the link while you, let them know.
Yeah, and there is a channel called SIG-release, and that's where the release team and the entire SIG release talks about the release and process around it. And when we have the application form ready, we post it there. So it should be available. You might be able to search for it, and then you get the application form. But at the same time, I think the best and easiest, in my personal opinion, is to go to Slack channel to check out on any SIG release
Yep.
related changes.
So I
And
just share the link to join the Kubernetes Slack on the screen. If you join this, search for a channel called SIG Release, and there, I think, if you keep monitoring the messages, I think, and it will be highlighted like very evidently in the next few weeks when the release team applications open. Vera had another question, which was, can you please clarify whether the release cycle is 13 to 15 weeks from the start of identifying the features, or are the features identified during the process?
that's a good question, and it's the short answer is the latter. And we have 3 releases in a year, so we start with 13 to 14 to 15 weeks to start and block as a release time frame. And during that 13, 14, 15 weeks, we say that okay, this is the timeline that every SIG needs to comply with and have everything ready for. And if they cannot get, for instance, some documentation in place or some enhancements details in the proper format, then those changes will not appear or will not be a part of the release. So the release process starts from the release team saying that, okay, this is the timeline. Please align with the all the timeline and deadlines that we set forward. We do have the discussion with each SIG saying that, okay, if you have any concerns around the schedule, we can change that before the release fully starts. So the first couple of weeks is about making sure that the release schedule is all sound and fair. And after that, it's about the release, each SIG making sure that they are part of the release timeline and making sure that they can get things done, such as code changes being code freezes around week 10, week 9, week 10. So if you can't make the code change by then, that means the particular change that they may have wanted for the 136 won't be a part of 136. They have to wait for another release in the future.
Yeah, I think Ryota, your excitement talking about the release and the process and the people is getting the people who are viewing the webinar pretty excited. And we have another person asking, is the SIG release team application like, do they accept junior DevOps engineers? I think the short answer is yes, but I will let Ryota expand on it. And maybe I think this is how we can conclude the webinar also. My last question ties in with this. Like, one, I think you already said that anyone can apply and they're encouraged to apply. But could you share maybe what made you apply personally, and not only apply but stick through from 130 like 1.32 to 1.36? I know you said it was the people, but maybe touch upon like the things you learned, and what else just kept you being part of the release team.
Yeah, so to answer the question first, it is accepting any sort of level. It doesn't have to be that you have to work a certain number of years or Kubernetes specific knowledge isn't specifically needed. Obviously, it would be helpful when we are reviewing all the shadow applications. As I said, there are 400 or more applications in each release, and then we would only have like 20 or so spots. So it's very competitive, and we look at every single candidate and every line and every detail for the form. Application form is quite lengthy. It does take time to actually write up the application, and a lot of people do it because they care about Kubernetes, and which is really exciting to see. So I think what I learned from the Kubernetes experience as a release team member is that there is so much that Kubernetes has as a part of the release process that I can definitely apply for work and other environments. One of the things that I didn't talk about too much, but I really appreciate and I really strongly believe in, is how Kubernetes is a very global project. And as you mentioned briefly, there's just so many people from all over the world and different time zones, and the coordination is quite difficult. But people do it, people manage it, and people can actually get things out and get the release out like this in this 136. And that goes from this asynchronous communication as the first thing that Kubernetes does, and it knows that the team is just spread across everywhere, like every continent and every different part of the world. So that's something I learned, that this is such an enormous project, but so successful, being inclusive and making sure that everyone's work gets in a way that it gets shipped to the community. So release team is one easy way, I would say. If you do not know how to code or have very little experience with coding, or I guess the contribution to the open source project like Kubernetes with this size of project, I think it's intimidating to start with. The release team is a really nice segue to get that initial step of getting involved in Kubernetes ecosystem as a whole, and then you learn a lot from there. So I am definitely keeping an eye on the release team going forward. I would probably not be a part of the release team in a release lead perspective, but at the same time, I would be curious to see what other options I would have to join other parts of the Kubernetes ecosystem, like different SIG or different release setup, that it's not about the release team, but maybe there is something that I can work on with the SIG release umbrella. So those are the things that I would definitely be keen on learning and exploring more, because there is just so much to explore, so much to learn, and it's been such an exciting journey for the past 2 years or so, that yeah, I would surely continue. And it's I've done the release lead, and I thought that's a lot to handle and a lot to take in. There is so much more. So it seems like the journey never ends, which is in a way good, that I can be excited about, in a way daunting because there is no ending and there is so much to learn. But I think that's a journey that we all have to do, and appreciate the fact that it's not boring at all.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant way to sum up your experience and also uh, end the webinar. So yes, please, if you are watching this and if Ryota has managed to like excite you about the release team, I would definitely recommend applying for the release team. I think there is a lot you will learn and appreciate about how like a large open source project works at scale, and I'm pretty sure you're not going to regret being a part of the release team. In the end, I would just like to plug in that if you have still not tried the 1.36 release, or if you want to learn more about it, there's obviously the official release blog, but on our website we also published a blog where we talked about the new features we found interesting in Kubernetes 1.36. I'm posting the link for that in the chat. You can check that out, and let us know what you think about it. And I'll leave it to Ryota in case he wants to plug in where you can, people can follow up on you or maybe ask questions or anything, any other webinars or stuff you're doing over the next few weeks.
Sure. So yeah, if you want to touch base with me, probably the Kubernetes Slack is the best place. I do have socials, but I don't usually use them, so I might be slow to respond. So just ping me on Slack in the Kubernetes workspace. And in terms of the webinar and the other schedule, I think one thing that I would highlight is I think there are probably quick three things. So release announcement is out, so you can just go to Kubernetes blog. You can find the release announcement, Haru being one of the top picks, and it's probably easy to find. The second bit is the feature blogs. This is something that we do after the release. So each day, I think each working day, there is one blog, and probably for the next 3 weeks or so, we would have one blog per day highlighting one particular part of one feature or particular part of the features in this 136. It's called a feature blog. So we have a very detailed blog about some specific technical details and use case details that are covered in the blog. So yeah, do check out the Kubernetes blog. There is a lot to find out about the 136. There are a few things that needed more kind of delving and understanding in order to get the full context about why this particular change is interesting or important for 136. Those are coming in the next 2-3 weeks, I think. And the one last bit is the webinar. We would have a CNCF hosted webinar on, I believe 22nd of May, and that's about 3 weeks from today. So yeah, please, I'll be around with another 2 members from the release team. So that's something I'm very much excited about. And yeah, if anything else, yeah, hit me on Slack.
All right. And thank you so much, Ryota, for doing this with us. I think everyone who joined in found this really informative. And thank you all for joining for the webinar. And we'll post the recording for this webinar on our socials, so you can follow us on our socials. But if you signed up, you will also receive an email with the recording. And that brings us to the end of the webinar. Once again, thank you, Ryota. And yep, thanks for doing this.
Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.
All right. See you. Bye.